So welcome everybody and good morning. This is our final session in our TABE training series. As you can see on your screens today, we're going to be talking about TABE results, how you use them, how you share them with participants, just really how we talk about assessment with our students. So before we dive into that, just like we did last week, I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any outstanding questions? I didn't get any through email this week. But if anybody has any outstanding questions from last week or the week before, again, go ahead and ask and we'll try and address them right off the top. No? Everybody was crystal clear on NRS last week? That's almost unbelievable. So I will tell you, we're working on getting the recordings of all the sessions and the PDF copies of all of the slides up on the South Dakota All website under the resources section. So watch for that maybe in the next week, maybe two. Give us a little time for that. If you want the recordings before that, I can always just send you the link directly, but they'll be housed in South Dakota All's website as well. So, all right, so we're going to start today by talking about how we frame TABE testing with our participants. How do we discuss this with them right off the bat? Then we're going to take a look at the few of the reports and resources that we have access to through DRC and how you can use them. And finally, we'll talk about how you discuss TABE results with your participants and discuss next steps with them. So as we go through today's training, as always, I'm going to urge you to share your tips on using TABE reports and talking about TABE results with your students. We all have different approaches. We all have different tips and tricks. We all have different personalities and qualities that we bring to those discussions with our students. So I really want to hear from all of you as we go through today about how you frame these discussions with your students about assessments. So let's just start by thinking about how we introduce our participants to TABE testing. I mean, do you tell them
Your audio is gone.
Andrew, did you freeze as well? No.
I'm really glad that somebody
home.
else is saying that because I'm not hearing her either.
She's froze.
All right.
Yep,
Andrew, do you want to correspond with her?
Sure.
I appreciate that.
While we're waiting, does anybody have did anybody have a comment to her question? Which was, I think,
can always talk, but
yeah.
This is Steph, and I'll just be the first to say that students always wonder why we're doing it. And I think it's really important to just kind of let them know that we have to have a starting point and something that informs instruction in a reasonable way, because we don't get their transcripts and we don't know what they remember from high school. And oftentimes they've been out of school for so long that we don't know if they remember what they think they remember.
Too, it's important to emphasize it's not a test because that scares them. You know, I just tell them we're just trying to find out what you know. So just to let them know it's not really a test. There's no actual pass or fail or anything like that.
Regarding that sentiment, what kind of plain language is best used? Can we say things like diagnostic sounds too polysyllabic to me, too esoteric? What about, we're trying to get a baseline, or we're trying to, identify what you know so we don't waste your time? Or what language do you use to really connect?
I always tell them,
Oh, sorry.
oh, you go first. You go, Darcy.
Oh, sorry about that. I just make a point of saying we need to know where to begin. And I really try to use the word assessment. This is just going to assess the skill level where you are. So we can then create a study plan for you that will be most beneficial for you to help you progress to eventually get to where you need to be. So I just put it out pretty simple like that. Again, just like, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Just mentioned about never using the word test. And occasionally I do call it a test. I slip up, but I do, and then I will say, it's really not a test. It is an assessment of your skill level so we know where to begin.
Yeah, and my point was, I always tell them, I don't want to give them a bunch of fluff that they don't need, but I want to give them things that are really useful for them. So I need some kind of starting point.
I always tell them also it's not a pass or fail, because they're like, oh, did I fail the test? Did I pass? It's not a pass or fail. It's just to see where we start. And so
Yeah, that's a, oh, did I interrupt someone? I apologize for the technical difficulties. Jennifer, your comment really resonates with me because they're all bringing various and probably at least, I won't use an adjective, but certainly their personal experiences as it relates to education. And when it seems high stakes, yeah, if they don't understand that from the onset or prior to that, I mean, that just is going to heighten, and where it's a pass fail versus, and to be really explicit about that. Okay.
Does anybody else let the student know that it's linked to our funding, that the reason that they don't need to pay anything is because the government does, and we've got to show the government that we are actually helping people. So we need to know where they start, and then, show they're getting improvements, or that they've reached their goal, gotten their GED. Because I do.
Sometimes I talk about that at the end. I typically don't talk about it at the beginning because they're already drinking from a fire hose and I'm giving them so much information.
Yeah, I use that when I give the post test, talk them into it.
I think
I
it
do
takes,
if a student's really nervous. I do for the post test more often, but with the pre-test, if it seems like you can't fail it explanation didn't work, then sometimes putting the reason on something other than for them can help.
Yeah, and I do explain too that it is necessary for them to enter the program, that I must have some kind of way to start with them and some kind of way to assess how they're progressing, or some way to see that they're making progress. So they do hear that. I just don't necessarily tell them it's tied to funding until the end, because most of the time they don't really care.
Yeah.
I think what I say is probably closer to what you said. Sometimes I'll use the phrase, and no, I lost the phrase that I use. Oh, I said it activates you in our system, or it makes you active as a student. And that seems to work for some students too.
Nikita, to that point, yeah, some students, depending on their educational background and experiences, right? Maybe don't even understand like enrollment, but you know, in other contexts, activating, or if you're out at Lake Area or Southeast Tech, you're essentially being enrolled into a program on a community or a technical college. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities. I've heard too, you know, regarding the funding and using that as a reinforcement, I've heard where teachers will explain that it's not only federal funding, but there's state funding and local funding that help support these programs. And it's a way that we can continue offering services at no cost to the learners to help people in similar circumstances in which they find themselves. And I hear that has some effect. And there is kind of that civic component too of, you know, our accountability is as teachers. And I don't know if any of you have ever addressed that, but it's one way that we can make sure we're effective teachers serving you, sort of thing, or sort of approach rather.
I've actually said I hold my teachers' feet to the fire by giving the post test, and they love that. And they will do things to show that the teachers have done their job well.
I'm back.
Hey.
I had to totally restart my computer. I was completely locked up. I don't know what happened there. Thank you all for continuing what sounded like a really great discussion while I was gone.
And
Becky, the same thing happened to me. I had
Did
to
it really?
restart as well. Yep.
Steph, to your point about holding your teachers to the fire, you know, it's really that shared accountability. And we're asking our students who maybe haven't in the past, whether it's role models or personal experience or executive functioning levels, or their personal circumstances, situational or generational, to really take responsibility for their learning and their goal setting, and that we're in this too, right? We have accountability as well. And from that sense, it's almost a work readiness, I don't know, family literacy opportunity as well, it seems.
You know, I like bringing up the financing at the beginning because it lets them know that even though it's not costing them something, it's not free. And it is maybe their first GED government and economics lesson.
That is a teachable moment, yeah, with numeracy and civics and social studies. Becky, yeah, great conversation.
Good, good. I'm glad. I'm not sure exactly when you left me, but it sounds like you got the gist of where I was going on this slide. So I'm glad about that. I knew that you would. So I'm going to go on because it sounds like I'm going to have to go back to the video and watch that discussion because, like I say, it sounds like a very good, very rich discussion. So, you know, another way to think about it is really, why do we assess students with the TABE? And this is more complex than I think we think about on a daily basis as well. So there's multiple reasons here. We know reporting, right? We need to assess for federal performance and state performance, and we need to assess using those uniform approved assessments so that we really are comparing apples to apples when we report on our participants and their gains. If we were all using whatever random assessments we chose, we'd never be able to make a true comparison to the federal and state standards that we're asked to meet. So that uniform reporting is so important. And it's also valuable for planning professional development at the federal and state levels. The professional development team really does look at NRS data and GED data when thinking about what types of trainings are going to be most helpful to teachers and programs. And the federal staff does the same thing. They look at data trends nationally and they determine training needs at the national level. And some examples of programs that have come from that type of data examination of our assessments are the STAR Initiative, ANI, the Adult Numeracy Institute, and Journey to Enrollment. They look at those trends and they say, we need to do something to help states and programs. For us as programs and teachers, as you were all just saying, we need to know how we're doing, right? We use assessment results to determine if we need to make programmatic changes or if we need to provide different services, or if there's something that we need to do differently in our classrooms. If our students aren't getting the material we're giving to them, we need to rethink how we're presenting that material. We also use that data for other purposes. If we're writing grants for additional funding from sources other than Title II, like United Way, or private grants, foundation grants, city and county governments. And again, teachers use those assessment results to plan their lessons and to place students in appropriate classes. So there's a lot of different reasons for those assessments at the programmatic level, at the state level, at the federal level. But I think one of the most important pieces is what you all were just discussing. We need to assess for our students because they need to understand the skills they come to us with and the skills they need to build. And they need to have that baseline so they can see the progress that they're making in our classes. They need to understand what their skill levels are and how they're progressing. And they need to have skills that they come to us with validated. And I know we've talked about this before. How many times has a newer prospective student told you that they are dumb or they just can't learn? Showing them that they have those academic skills and that the work that they've put in the past has paid off can be a huge confidence booster to them as they enter your program. And letting them see that they haven't forgotten everything that they learned in school, and that the life that they've lived since they left school has given them skills as well, I think is a huge piece of assessment conversation that we have to have. And I know you were all just having that same conversation. So I think there are so many reasons why we TABE test our students. And sometimes our focus narrows down so small to just knowing that we have to have that score to put in so that we can count that student in our program for the year according to the NRS guidelines, is doing all of us a disservice. So yeah, any thoughts about that?
When I was a little girl, my dad would show us his real estate tax receipt and the amount that went to education and told us to make sure we were getting his money's worth. So
it's that same kind of thing, right? And I agree with you, Ruth. I do think there's some value in letting students know that while the program comes to them at no cost, that somebody is footing the bill, right? That there are costs associated with the program, and that they're really getting a quality service, even though they're not having to pay for it. So
one
yeah.
thing that Brandy and I have talked about that I need to stop doing when I, ask my students if they prefer the door be open or closed when they take the test, I need to not wish them good luck, because I have seen the effects of good luck. The TABE shows that they know things that they don't. I don't want them to have good luck on this test.
I do that all the time as I'm walking out the door. I say good luck because it seems like what you should say. And then I have to have this awkward backtracking of, you don't need luck.
We need accurate information.
I know how that is so easy to say good luck. It does seem like a nice thing to say, but one thing I tried as a teacher, one of the habits that I've tried to cultivate is to say, do your best. And that's become my standard response now. That's become a part of my lexicon. Do your best.
I would just tell them, have fun, like it's not the end of the world. No matter what you do, we'll work with it from where you at, so just don't stress out. Just do what you can,
Have fun. I like that one. But yeah,
My
and do your
standard
best.
is show me what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Show me what you know. And those are the things that we're asking them to do, right? Do your best. Show us what you know. And I think that also sets the stage for what we're going to ask them to do in the future, right? In class, we want you to do your best. We want you to show what you're learning. And so, yeah, I like that a lot. And I like that reflection on what we're the message we're leaving them with when we put them into that situation, right?
I wanted to share just a little point, kind of backing up to about what John said about how some students bring certain for lack of a better word, baggage with them when they come. Way back when we were first starting, and obviously last year was our first year, we had a gal come in and she was about my age and had decided that she wanted to start working on her GED. And we talked to her a little bit about assessments, and I explained to her, it's not a test. It's just to see where you are. And she got really nervous. So, but I kind of talked to her. I thought she was okay. And literally, while she was taking her math TABE, she had a panic attack, had to leave the testing room. She came back to the room where we were because we had her on camera. I was like, what's happening? And she came in and she was hyperventilating, and we had to kind of walk her through that process of, it's going to be okay. And we were able to calm her down, and she was able to go back. But I think the reason why I wanted to share that story is I think it is important to remember that this language that we use, how we present this, is important, because we don't know what people are bringing with them to the table. I mean, that was a very dramatic experience, and we haven't had one since, but I think it does speak to the fact that people are bringing some serious anxiety with them.
Thank you for sharing that. No, thank you for that. It's a very good reminder, because yeah, that's not the norm, but how many of our students are having those internal panic moments that don't manifest in that real, obvious physical way that they're dealing with. And I've had so many students over the years too say, how can I study for this test? I don't want you to study for this test. That's not what this is about. We don't want you studying for the pre-test. What we want you to do is come in and give us a clear picture of where you're at, because that's what we need to know as your teachers. That's what we want to help you with. And I always tell them too, this is the least pressure you should ever feel on an assessment, because what we want to know is what you don't know, right? That's what we're looking for. So it's okay. We don't expect anybody to know it all. That's not the point of this. And it's not like you have to hit a certain level to be able to be in our program or to join our classes. We just need to know how to help you the most effective, efficient way.
And they're all bringing baggage, that's for sure. They're in the GED program for a reason.
Yeah.
And we need to really remember that. And it's incredible, some of the experiences they bring.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I also like to set up that kind of growth mindset attitude towards assessment right away, and tell them, this is important for you to know too. You need to see your starting point, because all we're asking you to do is just to build your skills consistently. The only thing we want you to do is be better than you were yesterday, right? If you leave our class knowing that you know something that you didn't know yesterday, that's the goal. That's all we want. So, asking them to start thinking about assessment in that way can hopefully help to minimize some of those test anxiety issues. And I know some of them are very deep-seated, and it's a very real. So yeah, whatever you can do to help put them more at ease, by all means. I know this is before we do GED testing a lot of times, but sometimes there's so much nervousness in our lobby when people are waiting to get checked in for GED testing that it starts to make me nervous. And Kim, I know, has done before, like had people do some breathing exercises just to help them, kind of focus and center and just lower that heart rate a little bit, pull the anxiety down a little bit, to just help them to put everything into perspective that way. So yeah.
The thing is too, I like to tell my students, even when they're working on a math sheet or something, just some problems, and they just fall apart if they make a mistake. And I try to tell them, that's something to celebrate. That means you have an opportunity to learn. And even when, and trying to convince them of that is a process. And then when they do go take the GED test, I always tell them, just do your best. If and then we'll take it from there. It's not the end of the world if you have to take it again. And it's cheaper the second time anyway. I try and encourage them, that it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you all have a lot of tools and skills already for discussing assessment, but there are some tools available to help us also analyze and discuss those TABE results. And I wanted to go over some of those tools just so that I know that we're sure everybody's aware of what's out there, right? So let's take a look at some of the reports and tools we have to help us understand and communicate those scores. The first one listed here is the grade range scale score guidance. TABE 11 and 12 is the first TABE version to not include a grade equivalent score as part of the TABE score report. The scale score for each subtest is listed and the NRS level is listed, but there's no grade equivalent which corresponds to each scale score. The rationale behind this change is that the scale score and NRS correspondence are a more valid score than the grade equivalent. And this doesn't represent a change in terms of showing performance gains because the scale score is always what has been used as the determiner in the past as well. But this was a big shift in thinking for those of us who had worked with the TABE in past versions. TABE has provided a TABE 11-12 grade range scale score guidance document for us to use when a grade equivalent is needed for a TABE score. For example, determining a starting point for diagnostic assessments. Like those of you who have participated in STAR over the years, they tell you to start at a grade equivalent level in those diagnostic assessments for their TABE reading test. So sometimes we need to know that. I honestly, people were kind of up in arms about this when it happened. I honestly think that this is a really great shift because I can't tell you how many times it would be really disheartening to so many of our students who would find out from that TABE report that they had like a 5th grade level math score. Oh, I'm only as good as a 5th grader in math. No, you have a skills gap that indicates that there are some skills at that 5th grade level that you need, right? That's how I used to discuss that. Now we don't have to do that, right? I like thinking in terms of, those NRS performance levels. That's a 6-point scale. And so it's very non-threatening to people who've looked at things like a grade equivalent in the past. So, if you think in terms of that, like if they've got that NRS 3, you've got really great base skills, right? You have a really great foundation of learning that we're working off of, and now we need to build some of those higher level skills for you. So let's work on those. Yeah, Jeremy said he agrees the shift away from grade equivalent is a positive. It's really demoralizing to have that conversation with people. But if you need that for some diagnostic assessments or for another purpose, or if you're just curious, right? This document is available and it does NRS level and grade range equivalents for all of the tests, reading.
Where's that document at? Where is that? I don't have that.
I'll make sure that this gets included in the documents that are saved on the South Dakota All website too, Judy. They used to have it on the DRC homepage and it's not there anymore. I had it saved. So I'll just make sure that a copy it gets included in those resources because yeah, it's a harder one to find. I've heard that they still have it somewhere, but it's you'd have to dig for it. So yeah, I'll just make sure it's included in our stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey Judy, I have it on the clipboards in the classroom. I can ship one in inter-office mail too.
There you go.
Hey, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. DRC also provides a TABE to HSE concordance, which gives an overview of the relationship between the TABE and the GED. So this does just the TABE reading and TABE math subtest results and the passing criteria for the GED. So it starts with a little explanation And then you get this concordance chart that tells you, minimum HSE passing scores for reading. It includes the high set, which we don't do in South Dakota, so you can just ignore that part. The second level, the college ready, and then the third level, college ready plus credit. And it shows you kind of the equivalent GED, or I'm sorry, the equivalent TABE scale score ranges there for both reading and for math. It's kind of interesting, and I shared this document with our Cornerstone staff a couple of weeks ago, and I think that I made Nikita panic that she was not doing the right things in some of her classes, and I was just like, no, that's not why I wanted to share this. But I think it can kind of give students an idea too of where they need to be. That one of the questions that we all had at Cornerstones was that 537 minimum passing score seems low to think about in terms of a scale score, because you're really, you're working off the kind of the middle range of that M when you think about that. So I don't know how much stock I'd put into it, but this is a resource that's available to you. Any questions or comments about that? And I'll show you where to find all these on the DRC website as well. There's links to all of these on the DRC website. I can also share them with you because they're out there publicly available. But
Becky, will you go up just the one? This one's for math. Go back up to the reading one.
Back up to the reading one.
That
sure.
one. So reading is about 536. So about the same.
Yeah, about the same. Yeah, there's slight differences, but not major. Another document that can provide additional clarification on TABE scoring levels and scale scores and NRS levels is the TABE 11 and 12 scoring levels best practice guidance. You can see there's charts for each subtest that show the scale scores for each TABE level, their corresponding NRS levels. This is very similar to the chart that John popped into the chat that's included in our state assessment policy. You can use this document in tandem kind of with that HSE concordance and relate the scale scores that indicate GED readiness with corresponding test levels and NRS levels. And then also, this one includes language as well. Pages 2 and 3 of this document describe the out of range scores and the plus minus indicators and outline the implications of all of those things in the score reports. So again, if you see a score that has a minus sign next to it on your scale or on your score report, that means that that student is at the very low level of that NRS range, right? So when you look at this one, this student tested in level D, but they had a scale score of 501 with a minus behind it and an NRS level of 3. That tells you that they were like, they were within a hair's breadth of being out of range on the low end of that test. So what that tells you is you're going to post test them on the D, because as John has mentioned, the feds look down on us going down a level for a post test. If we pre-test on level D and post test on level M, they're really going to question the validity of that. But it's going to tell you that they're going to take a while to get up to the top of that educational functioning level because that minus is there. Now, on the other hand, in math, this student took a level D math and their scale score was a 656 plus. So again, that tells you they're bumping up against the top of that range for validity. So when you post test them in math, you probably want to give them a level A for that post test in math, because otherwise they might score out of range. They need just a couple of points and they're going to bump up into that next EFL. So to avoid having to do multiple post tests, you would want to give them the level A for math. And then their language score here, they took a level D and it shows scale score NA and NRS level out of range. That means that this student had a scale score that was outside the valid range for this assessment. And this again just underscores, number one, the need to do that locator test because it should place them in the correct level of the test. Number two, to remind them on the locator questions, do not guess, because there's only a limited number of questions on those locator tests. If they're guessing on those and they're guessing good, they can pop themselves into a harder level of test, and they're not going to be able to get an in-range score, a valid score for that harder level of the
I
test.
had
Somebody have a
a
question?
few of those, didn't we, Becky?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
what happened with the few of mine, is that they were getting lucky on their answers, and then when the test came, they couldn't answer the questions.
Yeah, remind them before they start that locator, please do not guess on these, because the answering them if you can and not answering them if you can't is going to put you in the test that's the right level for you. So you won't get way too many questions that are way too easy or way too hard. So, you know, that's kind of my explanation for that one. So again, that's the scoring best practice. Sorry, Ruth?
I'm sorry. So we should encourage them to leave things blank that they don't know on the locator. Or if they're maybe trying to decide between two answers, to go ahead and choose the one they think is better, or
I would
kind
tell
of
them
what standard?
if they have a reasonable expectation that they know what they're doing, they can go ahead and answer. But if they're blind guessing, no, leave them blank.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they think if they don't answer it, it's gonna be counted wrong, like a normal testing.
Well,
They're
and it is.
confused.
I mean, it is going to be, yeah, yeah, it is going to be counted wrong. But I mean, they're again kind of setting up the expectations for the test, and it's not like you're going to get a grade, right? It's not like you're going to get a % on this test. So you know, it's okay if you don't know to just leave it blank.
You know,
So
on
yeah,
that point-
that best practice guideline is a good document.
Sorry for interrupting.
No,
So on that point, and not to belabor it, but we were discussing facets of it earlier in terms of that plain language, how to use. Does anyone ever make that distinction? Because, I mean, knowing that our learners have such diverse educational backgrounds, and knowing so much that we do about test taking strategies and graphic organizers and all of that realm, and the GED being very much, oh no, you make educated guesses on that. Where this, do you ever talk about it in the sense of, this is not a test, right? We talked about that, but this is for adults. And do you ever kind of underscore that this is a different sort of instrument because it's for adults, and like we were mentioning earlier, it's identifying what you know, etc. But do you underscore that distinction to let them know that, like, disconnect it from their previous K-12 or parochial or whatever it might be?
One thing I tell my clients, and I just flat out tell them, you're not going to know everything on this test. You know, by design, you're not expected to know everything on this test, and you're going to have some that you can't answer. You know, I just kind of try to mentally prepare them for that, because some of them aren't used to taking that kind of assessment.
Nikita dropped into the chat some knowledge that she's gained from COABE's AI training that she's going through right now. How to use Chat GPT to turn things into plain language. Paste the text in and say, rewrite this to align it with the Plain Language Act. Very interesting tip there, I think.
And it works really well.
Good.
I tried it with some things and it's neat.
Good to know. Thank you for that.
Becky?
Yeah.
What is Chat GPT?
Oh, there's a T3 on that. It's an AI tool that you can use. You can sign up for free. You can type things into it, and you know, make requests. But yeah, look on the South Dakota All webpage in the T3 archive, and there's a T3 that's about Chat GPT. And yeah, I agree with Jeremy. Plain Language Act is a very useful tip. Thanks, Nikita. We talked a little bit about some of the other reports that we can pull last week as well. And again, if you're looking for a quick way to check for testers whose TABE scores might not have synced between DRC and LACES, or just who has actually done what test. I know a lot of times, because at Cornerstones, the person might be doing their TABE testing in Aberdeen, but their teacher might be in Yankton. So there's sometimes some disconnect there when they're in the process of taking a test, right? When we get test results, the people are sharing them back and forth immediately. But if you're looking to check up on that, DRC has a report called the On-Demand Extract. And again, this is the one I kind of walked us through. Oh, sorry, that's not the right one. That tells you, again, I've taken out the identifying information in this one, but it'll tell you what test that they've taken, so that assessment name, and then if they've started it or not, and if they completed it. And it also, and this is, I think, a nice thing, it gives you the times. I'll bump up my size on this a little bit. On those started and completed, so you can see how much time they took. So if you have a question about, were they speeding through this test? Boy, it seems like they got done with that fast. Were they kind of speeding through the test? You can see how many minutes they took on each test, because it gives you a start time and an end time. So, you know, if it was the locator or the practice, you're not going to expect them to spend that much time. But like reading part 2 and part 1, they get up to an hour on each of those. So, you know, they started at 3:29. They ended at 4:13. They took about 45 minutes on that. That's a reasonable amount of time for someone to spend on one part of the reading test. So that's a report that you can pull out. And again, I'll go into DRC and show you where to find these things. And then again, the export details. And this is one that John highlighted to a couple of people. When you do that extract, oh, that's my little recovery telling me that that my computer shut down unexpectedly. And I've taken, again, names out of here. That extract you can do for a certain date range. So you can run it for a date range, and then you'll see the person's name, their student ID number, the instrument that they use, the form, the level, the subtest, and you'll get their scores. And you can see those minus scores are in there too. If there were plus scores in there, you'd see them as well. And this will tell you too, did they take it online or did they take it paper, for districts that are doing that both, right? And then the last one that I wanted to talk about is one that we all use all the time, and that's just the score report. That diagnostic profile provides a lot of information about student strengths and needs in the areas that are assessed by the TABE: reading, math, language, if you use the language, writing, if you use the, is anybody using the writing? Does anybody use the writing at all?
I have been.
Have you? How's that gone, Darcy?
Well, it's gone okay. But I thought I was supposed to. That's why I was using it. But I have since found out, unless they're really low in reading, that I don't really need to do the writing. But I like to see their writing because it kind of tells me where I need to direct them as far as some of their mechanics.
Sure. Yeah, I think it could be a helpful assessment. We have not done it at all at Cornerstones, and one of the standard setting sessions that I sat in on for the TABE 13-14 was for the writing assessment, and I kind of got a little insight into what it does and how it works, and it's intriguing to me. Let me say that. I don't know if it's intriguing enough to add it for every single student. I don't think that would be a good thing, and it's actually not even the point for that assessment, according to DRC. But you know, if you do have students who need to build some of those writing skills, it might be a useful assessment to have them do. But you know, the diagnostic profile does a lot of things, and it gives us a lot of information. And this is one of those things I think can be very intimidating to our students, because it does give you so much information, and it has that kind of official report look to it. So, you know, just breaking it down, the top part, I just explained to them, you know, here's the tests that you took. And the thing that's going to be most meaningful to you, and I actually take a pencil and I circle that NRS level column, you know, this is a scale of 1 to 6. And if somebody's in that 4, 5, 6 range on that scale, we know that they're either ready to take the final GED or very, very close. So, you know, if I was discussing this with this student, would look at those level 4s, I'd say, this is great news. You know, you've got the skills that you need for the most part to think about taking those GED tests. We'll probably take some GED ready tests to see where you fall. If there's areas that we need to work on, we'll know that. If somebody is lower, then again, we talk about you've got those foundational skills, you've got a strong base to build on. We're going to look at what we need to do to get you to the next level higher, right? So that's where my conversation starts there. And then when you go down, this is the other place that I like to direct them, because this again is pretty clear and easy to see, right? These are those same tests broken down into some major skill types. And you can see you get check marks if you're not proficient, which means you really have to work on that. If you have partial proficiency, which tells us you know what you're doing, but you maybe made some mistakes there. Or if you have proficiency, which is really good news because those are skills that you were really solid on. So again, the check marks are a really nice visual, and so many of our students are so visual to help them see, here are the things you're really good at. Excellent. There's a lot of check marks under the proficient column. Here are some things we might need to work on. And then I actually call these out fractions. And then they'll say, oh, I don't know how to do fractions. That's okay. We have a class that can teach you that, right? Expressions and equations, that's algebra. Yeah, I never understood algebra. Well, that's interesting because, you know, on algebraic thinking, you were proficient, you know, kind of calling them out and seeing where we're at there and having those conversations. And then again, if you scroll down, here's where you break those key domain skills down into actual smaller skills. And I also like to point this out to them, that demonstrated skills column are things that they did well. And again, so many of our students need to hear the things that they did well. Look, you know how to summarize an informational text. Summarizing is such an important skill for being able to understand what you read. It's great you can do that. And then you can look at those demonstrated skills, and then the areas for next focus. These are the things that I needed to know. This is why we took this test, right? This is why we had this assessment. These are the things that I need to know because these are the things we need to help you learn to get you ready for those GED assessments and get you completing that goal as soon as we can.
Becky, can I ask a clarifying question on this report that has actually been on my mind for some time, and I don't know why haven't asked you before. But in I love that graphic, the chart that breaks it down with the check marks, you know, but I've seen students who, for example, they maybe aren't considered proficient in any area, but they have partial proficiency in almost everything. And then they test rather high in the TABE. So then I have them take the GED ready, which indicates that they're ready to take the final exam. And yet this report shows partial proficiency. And I'm not sure that I've ever fully grasped why that is.
So part of that is this line right down at the bottom. Wait, I'm getting my annotation tools. See it?
I see that in the fine print. Some levels may have. Gotcha.
Yeah. Too few to show proficiency. So yeah, and that I think is one of the things that we need to consider with our students is, you know, so there were 6 questions in measurement and data. Was that enough? Apparently, yes. In this case, it was enough to show proficiency. But you know, sometimes if there's 4 questions and expressions and equations and they got 2 right, maybe that wasn't enough to say, yes, you're proficient. And I think that goes version to version, level to level. You're going to see some variations there, but that's one of the things I think that gets in our way when we're thinking about that full proficiency and partial proficiency. That's a great question, Jeremy, because
all right.
yeah.
I kind of suspected that I was probably overthinking it, and it turns out I was. So thanks for that.
Well, no, I don't think you were, because you want to be able to answer those questions, and especially if students ask that question, well, it says I'm only partial proficiency, so I can't be ready to take the GED. Not necessarily, because and that's really the only time I go over into that number of items total and obtained, right? If they were like one or two questions, so maybe it was just low enough so they considered you partial proficiency. If you'd gotten one more of those questions right, you would have been full proficiency. It's all it's all a test thing. Yeah. Any other questions about this report? Anybody else discuss it in different ways? My way doesn't have to be the right way, right? It's rarely true.
I made a form that's kind of like this, that just I think I've shared it before, Becky, that simplifies it a little, so it tells them their score on each broken down, and then whether it's level 1, and then I have a little explanation of what level 1, 2, 3, so that, just because I think sometimes this whole thing might seem very intimidating,
Mhm.
and but that's just I just always like to I'm always assume people are going to be as anxious as I am, so I'm like, let me clear it up for you just in case right off the bat, and simplify it before you even ask.
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Anybody else have a different format that they put this in rather than giving them this score report?
I also have been burned by the score report before, and again, this might just be a me thing, but at the top, the date says report date, which
Oh.
is not the date that they took the test.
The test.
And that has sent me on multiple goose chases for like
Right.
wrong test results from the wrong year. So just in case
Right.
anyone else
Yeah.
was gonna make
Yeah.
that mistake as well.
The report date is the date that you actually run the report from the computer, and the test date is the test date. Yep. So you want to be sure to clarify that for your own self. Yeah, it can bite us all. I want to go in. I'll start here. This is tabetest.com. This is the TABE home screen, for lack of a better word. It's not the DRC portal, right? This is just all things TABE. So you can see there's some sales things, there's some stuff for educators, tips and tricks, resources, those kinds of things. But here under resources, this is where I found a lot of these documents and where you can find them as well. You can see here, there's test taker tips, there's the individual profile report, that's the sample report I was just showing you. There's the remote proctoring documents are here. So if you're doing remote proctoring, or if you're interested in doing remote proctoring and you're not 100% sure how to get started with that, that's where you'll find those documents. That's the TABE 8 to HSE concordance is there. The accommodations guidelines, which we had some discussion about accommodations in our first week, I believe. The accommodations guidelines documents are here. There's TABE history if you're interested. Online testing and the online tools training is here as well. Pre and post testing recommendations. And then if you hover over 1112, you'll find more things here. You'll find some skills crosswalks, practice items, blueprints, testing times. That's where those practice items that we went over in our week 1 training came from. The scoring and reporting documents, again, you'll find the individual profile report there and some documents on paper and pencil scoring or scanning. And that's where the scoring best practice guidelines are. Under TABE training, there's some online training videos. There's the online quick start guide. And then there's where the TABE 11 and 12 certification process is as well. There's also some webinars. They have a webinar series that they've done. I honestly have not looked at those for a while, and my memory's escaping me how valuable those might be to you, but definitely if you're looking for more information on TABE, you can check those out. And then under DRC Insight, if we log in, excuse me. Again, if you're looking for reporting, you click on My Applications and go to Report Delivery. Here's where you're going to find those on-demand reports, where you can choose the report, whether it's the individual profile or individual portfolio, the locator profile for 11 and 12. You can search by a name, click Find Students, and it'll pull up those reports for you. And then here's where that on-demand extract lives as well, up at the top. If you click on-demand extract, first, it asks you to search for your site name. So I would put in Cornerstones, and if I spell it right, it should pop up. I select my site, and then you can generate an extract for any of these date ranges or a custom date range. So you can look at just this month, which since it's the 3rd of November, wouldn't do us a whole lot of good. We could look at the week, we can look at just yesterday or today, or we can go into the calendar and we could look at, I want to see all my testers for the month of October. And if you click Create Extract, it downloads into a spreadsheet. Questions about any of that?
I have a question regarding the previous screen, the on the Insight Manager.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's
where,
okay.
where that drop down, the TABE 910, TABE 1112, profile, portfolio. Do you or does anyone have a mnemonic? Every time I go to pull the report, I always either click profile or portfolio and have to reload. So do you have a way for me to remember which does what or what I'm...
Cynthia's got her hand up.
John, do you like NCIS shows? Criminal Minds?
I have not,
all those?
I don't have familiarity. I know the genre.
Okay, well, the genre, the very first thing, they build a profile on that serial killer.
Oh,
So
okay.
the profile is the entire room full of documents and piles of papers. The portfolio is the artist who wants to get a job. So he has his top 4 pieces of art in his little portfolio that he takes with you.
Fascinating mnemonic, Cynthia. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Cynthia.
You know, another how I remember it is that I remember the words are kind of reversed. So portfolio is a longer word, which is the shorter report.
Just did it wrong enough times I figured it out.
I feel heartened with the solidarity. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So again, we've got all these tools and they can be useful to helping our participants understand where they're starting when they enter our programs and to allow them to see the progress they make as they continue their studies with us. So really, how can we use them most effectively? And again, that shift away from grade equivalence, I think, has been very positive, because I think that focusing on where student skills are currently versus what they need to be to obtain a goal is a much healthier way to think of performance and progress for an adult than an arbitrary grade equivalent, right? So again, I focus on that 6-point scale and where they are on that 6-point scale and moving up to the point where we're going to feel that they're test ready. So how do all of you discuss these with your students? Does anybody have any real great conversations that they've had with their students about, especially at those lower levels? When they come in at those lower levels, I think those are the harder conversations for us, right? We like to celebrate the students who come to us close to test ready, but I think when we know they've got a longer road, sometimes having that conversation can be harder for us as teachers. Anybody have any tips?
Becky, I was just thinking, you know, sometimes it's more about like that once they've post tested, especially if they haven't hit that next level, it's really making them feel good about how much progress they did make. So, for instance, I had somebody that went up 60 points, but missed going up a level by 2 or 3 points. And just talking to him about how much that really is, and pointing out the places where do you see that we filled places that were completely non-proficient. You're now in that proficient category. And then just talking to him about the report where it shows what skills he did really well versus what skills we're going to work on next. And a lot of those things were the things that were like next on our next in line to be worked on. And so I think it's just helping them feel good about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Seeing that continuum, right? And I've had so many students over the years too who have said, well, I've been working at this for so long and I haven't really made any progress. And I understand that. It's not quantitative at that point, it's qualitative. Because when you are working on a skill and you're continually moving up in difficulty, right? Sometimes because you're still involved in productive struggle on a regular basis, it feels like you haven't mastered anything, right? Because we master a skill and we immediately go on to the next skill where we start to struggle again. And sometimes I think students get caught in that feeling and they're unable to see, you know, here's where you started and here's where you are now. There's a big difference there. And I think helping them to look at a quantitative way to see that, even if it's not associated with that number, like you said, Steph, looking at those proficiency check marks and how many of them have moved over into higher columns. Looking at that list of skills demonstrated and skills needed, and the demonstrated gets longer and the needed shrinks. That's really what we're working towards. So I would agree, helping them gain some perspective on where they were at the beginning and where they are now is really, really important.
It seems like sometimes, well, quite often.
Yeah, the questions change on the test.
Go ahead.
When they're working in class, they're not covering everything that's on the test. And sometimes they haven't quite gotten to some of those categories that are higher up on the test.
Yeah.
So we can talk about your mastering more of where you're at in class. And that's kind of hard sometimes because they haven't touched on some of the other concepts. That's why they're not moving up. That's why they sometimes are on the same level.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And Judy, what did you have?
Well, with some of my students I've had, the ones that come in at the lower levels, they know that they don't know stuff. And so they know they're ready to start working. You know, they've kind of prepared themselves mentally. I have more problems, not problems, but kids that come in and they've done well in school or pretty good, you know, and they find out there's stuff they need to work on, makes them mad, and then they don't come back. You know, it's like, well, you know, they get all huffy and stuff, you know, and it's like, you know, those are the ones that I have trouble getting to keep coming.
You know, Judy, it's interesting. We just had a very similar conversation during our administrators meeting the last couple of days, and I actually said the same thing. You know, the ones that look like they should have a short road are the ones that really worry me, because oftentimes persistence is lower for them than the students who, like you say, they know they have more work to do. They know they need help, right? And that could be why sometimes they think, well, no, I should be ready. I don't need to do this, or they're disappointed in the fact that it shows that they have some things to study and they weren't expecting it. So yeah, I think managing sometimes those expectations can be difficult. So of course, I know we're doing a TABE training, but I just always have to remind us all, TABE isn't the only assessment we use to show student progress. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You know, we think about required assessments for federal reporting like the TABE, those standardized assessments, but there are so many other kinds of assessments that you can use to help show your students the information that they've learned and the knowledge that they've gained. You can do those diagnostic assessments and show them the strengths that they already have and the strengths that they're building. You know, as you provide instruction to them, you're monitoring their progress and you're doing those formative assessments. It can be quizzes, it can be writing, it can be a portfolio of work, journaling, even just your conversations with them. And I know you all have conversations with your students on a regular basis about how they're doing and how they're feeling. If they have questions about their progress, you're having those conversations with them. Those are formative assessments. Some of you are using summative assessments. You know, you've got end of unit check-ins or quizzes at times. You might be using materials from a workbook that has an end of unit quiz, right? GED practice tests are summative assessments for us sometimes. We're through a portion of study and we say, okay, who feels like they might be ready for a practice test? And we use those as a form of summative assessment. And we need to remember that we've got those alternative types of assessments because it's really not reasonable or recommended to continually TABE test a person. And we want to limit the number of TABE tests that we're giving them in the year, right? We know we need to have at least one post test for them. A lot of times we have two if they've stuck with us through the course of an entire program year. But we don't want to get stuck in thinking, I need to show progress, so I've got to do a TABE. We want to use those other kinds of assessments as well to help motivate our students and to help them see their progress. The other thing I always like to think of is really academic learning is the only place where you're doing a formal standardized assessment to see progress. In the rest of our lives, we all learn different things and we have different ways to know that we've learned them. So helping our students understand that too, helping them see, here's how you know when you've learned something. Here's how you understand when you've mastered something in a way that's not a TABE test, I think is important as well. So what kinds of assessments are you using other than TABE tests in your programs?
This is Jeanette. I know it's not so much TABE related, but the Burlington English has new amazing tests that they just posted. And some of the younger students especially love that they can just log in and see their progress immediately when we see the results. So that's been very helpful. And so then they would be the ones that potentially would take the TABE language test for us at the right time.
Yep, exactly. It's a good example of a progress assessment for a student. Yeah.
Something that I've been kind of.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Nope, you first.
I was just going to say GED Academy has similar types of benchmark testing as well. So.
And I've used GED Flash. Just, you know, a lot of times they'll start at the 20% mark and then you can show them that they're gaining and they're at the 85% mark or the 90% mark. Geez, I think we're ready for another practice test, which is then your summative test to try to figure out if they're truly ready. So I feel like that's been a good one for us.
Good. Jeremy in the comments mentioned STAR diagnostic assessments. Those are a great tool to use in terms of building a plan for instruction and then again showing students as they progress.
Yeah, to me, those are diagnostic and summative in a lot of ways.
They can be, exactly. Exactly. Oh, and Jeremy said he's used pre and post assessments from iCivics in his social studies class. Yeah, I don't know how many of you use iCivics materials. It's a really great website and they have materials at both the middle school reading levels and the high school reading levels. So if you've got students who are maybe in that pre-GED level, you can use those materials that are written at a little more simplistic level with your students. Very good social studies materials. So really, regardless of the kind of assessment we're using, the way we provide those assessment results, again, can affect how students think about and react to the assessment results. We had a lot of conversation about this already, right? Because we don't want students thinking about learning only in terms of assessment performance. There's some research on this. The NRC report, Improving Adult Literacy Instruction, Supporting Learning and Motivation. It's this book. For those of you who've been through IDP, you might have copies of this. If you haven't been through IDP in the last 10 years, and you want a copy, I know John Anderson has some, but it gives us some guidance on delivering assessment results in ways that increase learner motivation, right? One of the big ones is presenting those assessment results privately. And this one always makes me laugh because as soon as they have good assessment results, they're sharing them with the rest of the class anyway. But for you to present those results privately is really important, because one of the things it does is it minimizes the chances that learners are going to compare their results with the results of others, and which leads them to adopting performance goals rather than mastery goals, right? The idea that they want to say, oh, well, I'm doing better than he is now. Well, he still might not be doing great, so don't use him as your measuring stick, right? Or, oh, look, they're doing so much better than me. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to be in this class. You don't want to end up with those kinds of comparisons. Now, I say this, Karen Tollefson, who's in our Mitchell office, has one of those classes where students are so encouraging to one another. And when they get their assessment results, they're sharing anyway. You know, they'll come in and they'll say, oh, I took a GED ready test and I got this score and it's this much higher. And the rest of the students are like, oh, that's so amazing. Don't give up. Keep going. I knew you could do it, right? But that's the student's choice and not our choice to share those results. And it always makes me happy to hear that our students are supporting each other that way. Again, encouraging students to focus on their effort and improvement rather than focusing on a specific score as a goal. This one gets hard for our GED students because we're really looking at, like, especially that GED ready score that tells us, yeah, you're ready to take that final test. But until we get to that score, focusing on just the effort that they're putting in, the work they're doing, and the improvement they're seeing as a result can be very motivating. Motivation is strengthened when students feel that they can improve their skills through that work. And intrinsic motivation is shown to increase when students are rewarded for improvements rather than the attainment of an absolute score. Again, opportunities for ongoing assessment that comes in different forms, so students have different ways to measure their growth, and providing that specific feedback that contains suggestions to continue improving. Help students think about the assessment results as a tool rather than an indicator, right? This is a tool for us to use to plan what we're going to do next to keep improving, not an indicator of how smart you are. And so if we can help our students see their progress and improvement, they should continue to remain motivated until they can reach their goals. Now, we know, of course, there's barriers that get in the way to that can interfere, but as long as that motivation exists in them, even when those barriers pop up that interrupt their study, they should be motivated to come back when they're able, right? So I want to hear other strategies for motivating students to persist that you have used or that you're trying or that have been successful for you in the past.
Harassment.
Say that again, Judy.
Harassment.
Harassment. Judy's a stalker. Harassment can work, right? And I think one of the things, you know, you say you call it harassment and we laugh about it. I think what you're showing there is that you care about them, right? You believe in them enough to make.
I have a lot of them say, I really am glad you pushed me, that you called me, that you know, kept on me to finish, you know.
Yeah, you care
So-
enough about them to reach out and say, hey, you haven't been in class.
Yeah.
What's going on? How can we help you get back to class? You have the potential to do this. That's what that tells me, Judy, is you have that relationship with them where you're showing them, I know you can do this and I want you to believe it too. So I totally believe that that's motivating. Oh, Karen Tollison, she told me this in a direct message to me and not with everybody, but the student I had in mind when I was telling that Karen Tollison story, one of her students who's been working with her a long time and has really, really struggled to make progress in the past, took a GED ready test, got a much higher score than he has in the past. And she said, and he told me I only have 8 more points before I can get my GED. So, you know, he's looking at the points, but he also is recognizing the work that he has put in to get to that threshold where he's on the doorstep right now. So.
I was
I
going
have
to, oh, sorry.
No, you first.
I was just going to say that a couple of things. I liked what Judy said. I know where this one girl works. She works at a convenience store, and it just happens to be literally 2 houses down from where I live. So I've walked in there a couple of times, and I always, you know, do my best to explain to her, yeah, we'd love to have you come back. And I always try to mention, because with her and with a couple others that are young, I always tell them that you're young. Now's the time. Trust me, it gets harder if you wait. So that's something that I will bring up. And then the other thing that I like to do, and because we have a couple of students that have been with us since basically my first day, not my first day, but very, you know, very close to that are still working with us. We have, we give them, what are those called? Folders to keep their work. And then I literally pulled out a bunch of his work and I said, see, I want you to look at all the work you've put into this. You've been doing this, you've been doing that. We're not doing that anymore. We've moved on from that. You figured that skill out. So, and he still has a ways to go. And so does this other girl. But I try to do things like that to keep people motivated.
Tangible
Now
evidence.
that we're in the convenience store, she decided to come back.
Good.
So she's actually now passed 2 of her GED exams. She's scheduled to take another one. And so hopefully she'll be a GED. She'll have her GED within the year.
Good deal. Very good.
I have some students that just don't have family or anybody supporting them. And so because they don't have a support system to share progress or to be excited for them, I've made a point to go buy some cards that have like the way to go. And I make sure I'm really specific when I send that card. You know, I'm telling them what they have done that's amazing so that they have something that they can be proud of to hang wherever they want to hang it and look at it once in a while and go, man, somebody thought that I did great. And then like I have a couple of students who they're living in group home and they have significant disabilities, but they don't necessarily ever get to go out or do anything. And so we're talking Taco Bell. We are not talking anything fancy, but you know, when they've passed something really big, I'll make an appointment to go eat lunch with them. And I pick up the tab and we just talk about all the amazing things they did and why this is a treat for them because they just don't have that support system to give them that otherwise.
Celebrations can be so significant, and getting your GED shouldn't be the only time you celebrate, right? We need to celebrate those small victories along the way, and that's very, very motivating. And yeah, just knowing somebody else recognizes the effort that you're putting in, I think can make a huge, huge difference to so many of our students, especially those who don't have a strong support system behind them outside of our building. Other thoughts about motivating?
Sometimes I use, you know, like what their end goal is. and I talk about how close they're moving to getting to that end goal. That's not the GED or not the, oh my goodness, do you realize that you just wrote 3 paragraphs and, do you realize that this is really, really good and you have a goal at work of being able to move up once you can do some report writing for your boss or things like that. I try to think about those things too.
For me, it's important too that the GED is just a door that's opening life to them. And I have several students that they've gone on to Voltech schools, one's in beauty school and stuff like that, and they keep in touch. We go to lunch sometimes and stuff, letting them know that they're doing so well, that GED just opened the door for them, and that's really reassuring for me that they keep in touch. I really like that.
That's also an important point, Judy, letting them know the GED is also a means to an end, right? That's not the last goal we have that they're going to work on. They're using that GED as a tool to open those doors and go on to something bigger, and keeping that big goal in mind too. Tying it to things that are important in their lives. That's the most motivating factor, right? Do you have a goal to go on and be a cosmetologist? Then yeah, let's get this GED and let's think about what that next training looks like, and keeping them motivated for those bigger life goals. Yeah. Karen Tollefson said, I tell the class they've earned gold stars. They love it. And she said, I need to actually start sending them some gold stars so that they've got a physical star as well as just the knowledge that like you did gold star work today, right? Danette said taking their photo with a cap and gown and hanging it up to inspire others. We ask for permission, but we do post our graduates pictures on Facebook when they give us permission. Because yeah, it's a success for them, it's a celebration for them, but it can also be really motivating for other people. And yeah, Steph said, love the idea that it's opportunistic for them, Judy. Yeah.
We've had a lot of students that just get emotional saying they never ever dreamed they would even have a cap and gown on. So we don't have a stage, but they would say it's something I never thought I would ever see in my life. So it means
it means a lot to people. It means a tremendous amount to them, and not just to them, to their families sometimes as well, when we have those little graduation ceremonies. I also think just that recognition that that they had the ability to see a goal through to the end is something that's important. And again, it doesn't have to be the big goal. It can be a small goal, right? This was a goal that we're working on to move closer to the GED. You achieved this goal, and having a little mini celebration for that, whether it's a card or a can of soda or whatever, just stopping to acknowledge like you've achieved part of what you set out to do here. Let's take a minute and celebrate that, and then let's go back to work and start working again towards the next step. Definitely. Well, we've achieved a goal that we set, which was to have a review of TABE testing and to really have some conversations about the nuts and bolts of TABE, to think about TABE in terms of NRS and performance and state assessment policy, and then to think about TABE and how we can use it to best serve our students. And I want to thank all of you so much. I always learn so much whenever we do these trainings, and I always come away with just so much appreciation for the amazing teachers in our state and the work that you all do on a regular basis with our students. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for your contributions and your willingness to discuss and share. And we'll get all of this information up on the South Dakota All webpage as soon as we can, so that if you want to go back and review, you obviously can. And as always, if you have other questions or concerns, don't hesitate to let us know. And this is really important. If there's other training, doesn't have to be TABE, other training like this though, that you think, I really wish we had training on that, let us know, because the PD team is always wanting to do things that are important to people and that people are asking for. The reason we did these TABE trainings is because people who were teachers in South Dakota were saying, we really need some TABE training. So if there's something that you want additional training on, by all means, email me, email Kim Olson, email Laura Smith-Hill, email John Anderson, and let us know what we can do to help. Kim dropped the South Dakota All PD link into the chat. So if you're wondering where you go to find those resources, the T3s are all archived there. The TABE trainings and resources will be archived there. SouthDakotaAll.org/PD. It's in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you put the T3 trainings on YouTube, I go back and do those because I can't do them when you actually do them. I never know. Could you put the title, like what it's about, on that, because there's so many of them.
Oh, I
and
do.
I have,
Is it not showing?
It's not. I was looking earlier for the Chat GPT. There are maybe an you know, a fifth of them that have a title, a thematic title, but the others I don't see that either. So
okay, I'll go back and look at how
Thank you,
we're
Judy.
I'll go back and look at how we're titling those and see if I can figure out why it's not showing up.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I always
Thank you,
do try and
Judy.
put what they are. So yep, I'll go back and make sure that you can see which ones they are. Thank you for that, Judy. I didn't realize.
Becky, for some reason, they're just saying SD Adult Ed T3 training and then the month.
Yeah, the month. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'll go back and make sure that the titles actually get to show up in that header. Thanks. That's good feedback. We need things like that.
My grandbaby's been talking to you the whole time, just telling you her whole.
Well, tell her we said hi.
Yeah. Maybe she could do a training. That would be so great for me. I would personally love that.
I'm pretty sure she could. See what I mean? She's just like on it. She's telling